so yes, I am hoping this will be a bit different from what we've heard up till now. I'm going to kind of take a much more big picture political approach to all of this. So continuing some of the themes that Professor Fuller just talked about. So I'm going to say this just once at the start. I'm a scientist and I'm a Luddite, and Luddism is not about being anti-technology, it's about being anti-technocracy. So I'm going to talk a bit about what technocracy is as the broad background to all these debates. So technocracy is the sort of techno-cultural regime that existed in our society since the beginning of the 17th century when its founder, Francis Bacon, coined its mission statement, knowledge is power. As its name suggests, it's a way of controlling people and nature through technology, and that's really extremely explicit in the writings of Bacon and the founders of the Royal Society, the key figures of the scientific revolution. And it's also very gendered, by the way. It's very misogynistic. It's very clearly about subduing and suppressing the female nature. I can talk more about that if people are interested. Here, Bacon actually proposed natural technocracy in his utopia, the New Atlantis, which was basically a scientific institution that has controls political power in his utopia, and it's run by a scientist who's called the father of the institute. So throughout the 17th century, you get this development of this mechanical philosophy of the world as a clockwork or a billiard ball, Newton's laws of motion, and so on. And what it's all about primarily is about creating order. We have this political chaos and turmoil throughout the 17th century. They're cutting off the heads of the king, they're doing all kinds of really scary things. And it's about creating a worldview, in which we can restore order. And so what happens as a result of that is you get the machine as the ruling ideal of Western culture as it has been for the last 350, 400 years. Key features of which would be efficiency, untiring performance, uniform, reliable output. And so that's nowadays we have synthetic biologists complaining that our nature as it's constructed now through evolution is so totally messy, we can do it much better, we can make it much more efficient. It's absolutely a continuation of that philosophy. And it's very much about domination and control of nature, including human nature. And this is what Michel Foucault is writing about when he talks about biopower, of the discipline of human bodies as it's developed over the last few hundred years. Key element of that would be the mental health system. So technocracy together with capitalism is what defines modernity, really. It's not the same thing as capitalism. The two things work together, absolutely intertwined with each other, but technocracy, is also very much part of Soviet, existing communist regimes as well. Actually, in many ways, in a more intense way in those systems. But technocracy is also our common sense view of the world that, we want evidence, we want to measure things, we want, things on materialism, impartiality, rationalisation and order. That's the view of technocracy. So when you come to the end of the 18th century, the beginning of the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution, the key, most important act of technocracy, i.e. the wholesale reconstruction of society, the way the world's organised, through a series of technical innovations. This is what the Luddites were fighting, and their slogan was that not that they were against machines, but they were against machines that were hurtful to commonality. And I'll come back at the end. That phrase, what that means, commonality. And what they were doing was fighting not machines, but the machine, capital T, capital M, of the whole Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution succeeded, the Luddites were put down through extraordinary amounts of physical violence. Since then we had, technocracy has gone from strength to strength. You see it really clearly in industrial agriculture, in cloning, in surveillance, but it's also about these kind of systems of administration and control, really. Bureaucracy, nowadays run, of course, with computers, and it's generally speaking the ideology of the middle managerial classes in our society. So at the beginning of the 20th century, you get another shift. You get a shift from metaphor, the basic metaphor changes from the machine to the system. You have Frederick Taylor, the sort of guru of what was called scientific management, which you probably know about the time and motion studies of workers, where they, analysed minutely how workers, bodies moved in factories as a way of breaking that down, taking all the skill out of it, embodying those skills in the machines, and thereby disciplining and controlling the body of the worker. That's the approach that dominated the 20th century through Fordism. That was the time at which you actually had an active political technocracy movement, which actually said we should hand over all power in society to scientists and engineers because it's all much too difficult for to run under a democracy. The technocracy movement didn't succeed, but one of its inventions was the first real serious example of intervention in the human body as a way of creating social order, which was of course the eugenics movement, which is all about basically cleaning up the messiness of nature and the messiness that comes from human reproduction, get rid of the defectives and the criminals and all those people who cause mess in society, and that will make your society more efficient and be able to compete with the other imperialist powers at the time. So you have the eugenics movement, which of course ended in the Holocaust, as we all know. But eugenics continued throughout the 20th century. We've seen the development of reproductive technologies, and we really are now on the verge of a kind of free market form of eugenics in our society. Steps are being taken every day in that direction. So the 20th century was a kind of the century of technocracy, if you like, but a kind of rather rigid hierarchical kind of technocracy. By the late 20th century, the computer really kind of started to kick in, and so we got this shift from Fordism to post-Fordism, supposedly called post-Fordism. I actually think it's hyper-Fordism, not post-Fordism, but where you have a kind of more flexible type of system where it's possible to allow individuals more freedom. The dominant sort of mode of social organisation becomes the network rather than the corporate hierarchical organisation, but nonetheless we're kind of all caught in that net. So the story of technocracy is the story of the takeover of all areas of our life by machines. We now, in a major wave of elimination of people's jobs through by machines. Stock market, most of the trading on the stock market is done by machines. We have drones that they're moving towards allowing the onboard computers on drones to take the decisions regarding targeting. So everything's basically taken over by machines, and I see cyborgs as basically just the latest manifestation of this kind of technocracy. It's a way of controlling the human body and integrating the human body into the machine in a very, very literal sense. Of course, capitalism wants our bodies to work like machines. So why not, actually turn them into machines? So of course, the real investment in cyborg technologies is of course being done by the military and by corporations. It's about making better soldiers and workers, but it's sold to us as this fantasy of individual empowerment and enhancement, and actually, as I say, I think if you think of Google Glass, where everything you see through the thing goes back into some big server in Google's cloud. I think there is very, very clear kind of way in which you're being very literally integrated into the system. So, for me, the values, the sort of ethical, aesthetic, political values of cyborgs are all about competitive individualism, power, efficiency, function, that word came up before, functionality, performance. This is what the technocracy wants to give us. To me, those values are fundamentally anti-human. And when we're talking about certainly when we're talking about the transhumanist movement, very straightforwardly fascist, basically. I don't find all this stuff sexy. I find human beings much more sexy, and I think we just have to learn not to be fooled again. You know, it's very nice to. Technocracy has these wonderful stories of how we can empower ourselves and do clever, fun, sexy things. You know, with machines. But all those stories, you know, like the devil's got the best tunes. All those stories. You know, never look at the picture in the you know, in the historical and political way that I've been trying to do. And I put to you a different way of thinking about human beings, which is the Luddite way, and that phrase "hurtful to commonality." And I think that that word commonality is about the values of being ordinary, being good enough, and not about not being the best, as capitalism wants you to be. It's about the values of community and about common humanity. And I think if you look at enhancement in those, within that framework, I don't think any of the things that are sold to us as enhancements are enhancement at all. I think there are, you know, a radicalisation of competitive individualism, which will indeed, as Steve Fuller said, you know, entrench social inequalities, create new classes, actually. You know, there's much more evidence that people's real well-being and happiness is, you know, is greater in societies where they're more equal, not where they're very near the end. So I think the other thing we see with so-called enhancements today, cosmetic surgery, very much about getting people to conform to social oppressions, whether it's sexism, ageism, racism. You know, all those things are about, you know, making us conform better to those oppressions, and of course to the other enhancements like Ritalin for improving your concentration. You know, that's about making you a better worker. Yeah, I think that I come from the disability rights movement. Actually, I'm a disabled person, although you can't see my disability. And the disability rights movement has a very different perception of humanity and of you know, what disability is. And it's not the kind of deficit model that we've heard here a lot about. You know, disabled people are less than. It's about you know, we are disabled people. We are being disabled by society which refuses to include us, which refuses to you know, allow us to access you know, the common spaces and so on, and the existence of disability oppression in people's attitudes. That's what disability is about. And what we rather than we need to think about. We need to use the slogan of the disability rights movement, which is people first, and not, as Frederick Taylor said, systems first. So I think I'm sorry to have poured cold water on a lot of people. You know, it's not something that I enjoy doing, and I'm not. None of this has been about saying we don't want to use technology. No, it's about saying we need to understand the politics of technology, the dominant politics of technology for the last 400 years. When we try and, you know, be clever hackers, most of the computer hackers that I've met end up as security consultants for the corporations. So I think you know, I'm sorry. Yeah, as I say, I'm sorry to pour cold water. We need to. We need to understand technology as a political regime, as a dominant political regime, and then we can maybe start thinking about what we really want by way of this kind of technology. Okay.